I'm going fly fishing with Britain's most high-profile river campaigner, the pop star Feargal Sharkey. He's probably best known for this song. The DJ, John Peel, described Teenage Kicks as the best pop song ever written. Feargal had other top 10 hits and a long career behind the scenes in the music industry, but now he's pretty much a full-time campaigner.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
So I want to know how a working-class punk who grew up in Derry during the Troubles ended up as the champion of Britain's rivers. And along the way, he's going to try to teach me how to fly fish. So one word of warning for you, Feargal. I've done the sort of angling with a float, whatever you call it,
Yep.
but I've never done fly fishing.
As Isaac Walton said, is it not an art to catch a trout with a fly? Can you count to 3?
Can I count to 3? I think I can manage that, yeah.
You're going to do fine. It'll be okay. Let's get going.
I'm not sure Feargal realises the scale of the challenge he's taken on.
So, as we can tell, we have a very handy cameraman as a target here.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
what we can do
So
is
if you could take
1,
Tim out.
2, 3. It's simple. 1, 2, 3.
And you're sort of feeding it with that hand a little bit.
I'm just letting it run through itself. If you get enough energy into it, the line itself will extend and shoot out all by itself.
I guess it's my turn now. Right.
Come, if you want, yeah, you just go for it.
1, 2. Oh, it's up in the tree.
Well, the good news is you're not dropping your back cast.
Because you grew up in Derry in Northern Ireland.
Yep.
And and you're a working class lad.
Yeah.
How did a working class punk from Derry end up doing this? Is considered the gentleman's sport.
It's a long time since anybody called me that, I have to tell you. Well, ironically enough, if you want to get into fly fishing, there is no finer place than Northern Ireland. A, it's not considered elitist, because lots of people do it. It's cheap, it's easily accessible, and it's open to all. So, by way of example, when I was growing up in Derry, I could go to the middle of town, get on a bus, and 20 minutes later, be standing on the banks of a river on the edge of Derry called the Faughan, and to this day, it's still got salmon running up the River Faughan. And I think at the time, membership of the Faughan Anglers Association was like 20 quid or something.
And was that cross community?
Yeah, it was never, I don't remember on the bank of any loch, lake.
So you might be fishing next to a Protestant.
Yeah,
There were bombs going off, and you're like, how's the fish rising? Oh, there's a good spot down there for trout.
You have to bear in mind that this thing about Catholics and Protestants. I had neighbours who were Protestants. Did it ever come up? No, didn't. Because ironically enough, they were living the same kind of lives.
The brown trout in the river are out of season, so we're going after a related species called grayling.
One of the beauties about grayling is not only are they a phenomenally sensitive fish, incredibly sensitive to water quality. So if you've got grayling,
You're doing well.
you know your river's in good shape.
He says his character was forged early on in life.
But growing up in Derry, in particular, Northern Ireland in general, during the late 60s and 70s, and particularly coming from a Republican background, there was all the disruption and the devilment and the punkish attitude you ever needed.
It was out there, you wanted it, it was there on the streets.
Well, bearing in mind that my parents, like a lot of parents, were out there on civil rights marches, so shall we just say there was any enough room for punky kind of attitude. And ironically enough, it was one of the things that was the driver of the undertones. In that's why we wrote songs about chocolate and girls. Could you think of a better way of spending a month?
It's not
just
bad, is it?
hang on, right here.
When Feargal Sharkey hit the big time and moved to London, he kept up his fly fishing hobby. And being an enterprising sort, he ended up as chairman of the oldest fly fishing club in England, the Amwell Magna in Hertfordshire.
Okay, point the rod down at the river. All right, start from there.
Oh. I think I'll let it.
lie on the water for too
That's
long.
okay.
This is not as easy as Feargal makes it look.
Rivers have become, you know, a real passion for you, haven't they?
But ironically enough, that goes back to me becoming chairman of the Alma Magna, in that we, as part of the handover, I began to realise there had been quite a big issue involving the drop in the volume of water in the river. And it's a conversation that had actually been going on with the Environment Agency and the local water company for 15, 16 years. Why, I could not comprehend why anybody was still talking about something 16 years later. So what that taught me was, it just made me curious as to why ultimately a bunch of old men who just want to go fishing had to go to all that trouble with the charity and spend a year and a half digging out information, freedom of information requests, putting our case together to take the Environment Agency to the High Court, just to get them to do the right thing.
Yeah, that does seem extraordinary, doesn't
I
it?
stupidly kind of philosophically went, well, if we had to do all of that, what else is going on?
Yeah.
And at that point, as I now describe it, Justin, I got an itch, and stupidly I scratched that itch.
Right, scratching. Go on, let's get the fly on here. Let's get
As
this.
it turns out, every time I scratch that itch, I just end up with a bigger itch.
He means the more he researched the issues facing Britain's rivers, the more serious he realised the problems were.
Every single river in the country is polluted. I didn't make that up. That's the Environment Agency data. So the truth is, one of the biggest sources of that pollution is the water industry. They're then filling pretty much every river in the country is now contaminated with sewage to some degree or
Now
other.
they're saying that they have to. These are sewage overflows
Yeah,
that are required because, you know, the system's flooding and they need to clear the water out. That's
Yeah.
basically their argument, isn't it?
and it's also an argument that very handily overlooks the fact that this country was taken to the European Court of Justice in 2012 because, curiously enough, there's quite an extensive bit of legislation about water companies and how and when they may be allowed to dump sewage into rivers. And the European Court of Justice ruled that what's going on in this country is illegal and that sewage overflows should only ever be used in exceptional situations. So we now know that last year they spent 3.1 million hours on 400,000 separate occasions. Is there anything remotely exceptional about any of that? The truth is,
3.1 million hours,
Yeah.
400,000
and we now beginning
separate
to
occasions.
correct. We're now beginning to think that is a gross underestimation of what's going on. To such an extent that just 3 weeks ago, DEFRA, the Environment Agency and Ofwat, have now announced a major investigation into the operation of 2,000 sewage works in England.
Now that is a triumph for campaigners like yourself, but it's not just you, is it? There's an army of
Oh,
anglers and environmentalists and other campaigners who've been saying we need to get on top of it.
Feargal says his experience of the Troubles explains a lot about his direct approach to campaigning.
I watched plumbers and electricians and school teachers bring down the government in Northern Ireland in the 1970s. So, of course you can. Why not? They're doing their own thing. Well, let's go and fix it. Simple. Yeah, and that led me on to the journey I've been on over the last, I think 4 years now.
And directing his considerable energies into river campaigning has transformed people's perception of him, says Feargal.
For decades of my life, I could walk into little pubs in rural villages in this country, and people invariably would want to talk about music.
Yeah.
In the modern world, I now walk into, it happened quite recently, a rural pub in a little isolated little village, and the barman wanted to talk about rivers. And that, for me, is the kind of really intriguing shift that's now happened, that normal people are now going, I have no idea about this river thing, Feargal. It's bloody outrageous. I'm absolutely furious. This is
Are they
going
like,
to happen.
I didn't realise you were a singer, Feargal. I thought you were a
No,
rapper.
there you go.
Teenage kids, did you sing that?
There you go. Such is the crazy life I lead.
He doesn't plan to stop campaigning anytime soon. In fact, he's got a new target in his sights.
The big thing that you've been campaigning on has been the issue of sewage. The bigger problem of pollution in the rivers doesn't come from sewage.
Well, it doesn't, because I will happily admit I picked on sewage because it was a very simple, direct message that was easily communicated. The barman in the little rural pub in a little village, everybody gets the idea. The truth is, the biggest polluter in this country is actually agriculture. and the industrialisation of food production and meat production, chickens.
What is the problem with agriculture?
Twofold. It's basically commonly slurry and fertiliser running off fields into rivers.
You know, this is fertiliser, so
Yeah.
you might think, well, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the river weeds would enjoy a bit of extra.
Horrendously bad thing. Someone sent me some pictures yesterday of Lake Windermere. Again, one of our national treasures. There's green algae in Lake Windermere because all of that fertiliser creates a massive explosion in the population of little microorganisms. And the simple truth of the matter is, extraordinary idea that it is, the fish actually suffocate because of lack of oxygen in the river or the lake. And that's the modern world we're creating. Go for it. Two.
As you've probably guessed, we didn't catch anything. But as I'm learning, that is not really the point. It's about being out beside a beautiful river, putting the world to rights.
There you go, my boy.
Oh, look at that's what I need.
One cup of coffee.
Cheers.
I'll
That's
stick
great.
with
Cup of
good
tea.
old British cup of tea.
Well, thanks for teaching me.
Slow to run.
Good lesson, and maybe I'll catch something next time.
Welcome
Eh?
to the world of fly fishing.